Well, good morning and or good afternoon or good evening, as the case might be. Welcome and welcome back if you're rejoining us on this live webcast channel. My name is Dalibor Petrovic, and I'm a partner at Deloitte, and I've had the pleasure of hosting this series of conversations with tech leaders shaping the future of Canada for the past 3.5 years now. And for those of you who are rejoining us, you would know that we are bringing to you conversations with technologists, technology leaders across the country, representing different industries who are sharing their stories and also reflecting on what are the most significant opportunities, what are the most significant challenges that they're facing, how they're dealing with those challenges, and also reflections on technology leadership in general, how the role of technology leader, CIO, CTO, CDO is evolving. And of course, we are doing this live, which presents an opportunity for all of you to engage with us and our guests. So please feel free to submit any questions you might have for me or for my guest. This is going to be about a 45-minute conversation, and I'm very, very thrilled and privileged to welcome Chadi Habib. Chadi truly is a legend and a luminary of Canadian technology industry, a vast experience that spans a number of global but also Canadian institutions, the iconic brands. Chadi is currently the Chief Technology Officer and the Head of Business Solutions for WSP. WSP is one of the world's largest professional services firms that's particularly focused on engineering and design pre-construction. I will, of course, let Chadi tell us more about that. Chadi, thank you so much for your time. My introduction.
Dalibor, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invite. Look forward to
it's a real pleasure. It's a real pleasure. The invite is the sort of intro was very short because my first opening question is always to ask my guests to please tell us your story, how you navigated your life and your career to now be at the helm of technology portfolio for WSP.
Thank you so much, Dalibor. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Happy to share as much as I can in the next little while. Maybe you can grab a couple of those things that I share, but maybe you'll also figure out what not to do in your life and career. So look forward to the chat.
Fair point.
Always tough to talk about oneself, but let me start it off by saying I'm an engineer by background, and we're going to tie it back when I talk to you a little bit as to why I'm at WSP. I studied at McGill University, for those of you who know that, mechanical engineering specialized in robotics. And one of the stories I always like to tell is I can remember the day I pressed on a plastic enter button that maybe not made me fall in love with technology, but made me think, you know what, I'm going to go down to this path. So let me tell you this story. My first job was an intern at a General Motors assembly plant in Canada. A lot of people don't know this, but General Motors makes a vehicle a lot of people know, Camaro and Firebird. They're the same vehicle. They're just branded under Chevrolet or Pontiac. And for the longest time, production of the Camaro and Firebird was in Canada. It was actually 20 minutes north of Montreal. It was a GM assembly plant that was producing about 1,000 cars a day. So when shifts were running, it was a car a minute coming out at the end. And these facilities are billion-dollar facilities. As you can imagine, there's a lot of tech in them. And there's a lot of tech that overlaps technology and engineering. And one of my first jobs was to work on the robotic systems that either did paint in paint shop or resequencing vehicles in the plant. And without getting into the detail of how vehicles are built in the plant, but to get to the plastic enter button, I remember as an apprentice, if you will, working under another engineer, the first time I uploaded my code and it was off shift, it was between shifts, and I hit that enter button, and this 2-ton machine swung around. I said, wow, the power of this little piece of code made that little thing, that huge thing move around and do what it needs to do. And I said to myself, there is something here about this combination, marriage of code that you see on a little screen with this plastic keyboard and the real physical world around us. This is now over 25 years ago. And my path went from there to, I spent a lot of time doing development, went across the country in the US, worked for a company called EDS that doesn't exist anymore. It got bought out by HP, and recently I think the DSC Systems, I think is where it landed eventually. So I spent about half my career in consulting. I call it the dark side. Sorry, Dalibor. I spent half my career on the dark side. I worked for consulting companies and software companies, SAP particularly, tremendous amount of learning. And then I got to the point where I said, you know what, I have to live with the consequences of the decisions I make. Again, sorry to all my consulting friends. And I said, I'm going to switch over to the client side. And
Yep.
I was very blessed, moved to Europe, worked for a company everybody knows, Rio Tinto, has 5 big divisions. One of them was based in Paris. My first global experience, multicultural experience. I'll tell you a little bit more about that a little bit later. And I can tell you honestly, that was the first time I had a full CIO job. Actually, it was CIO and head of shared services. So we're doing middle and back office, payables, receivables, and things like that. And if I go back to the day I pressed that keyboard, I had always said, you know, I'd love to have an impact on an organization. Yes, I was also ambitious. You can be transparent about it. And I wanted to get that top job. I didn't realize the first one I would have would be at Rio Tinto Engineered Products. I ended up working for the most incredible CEOs in the world. I'll talk to you about that later. And then I left Rio. Of course, at this point, I had been in either manufacturing, high tech. And for those of you who are different industries and you're in tech, one of the sectors we always look at is banking and insurance. Why they spend a lot of money, compared to manufacturing or consulting. They spend 2 to 6 times more as a percentage of revenue on tech, and for good reason. Their entire value chain is technology, right? Think about how you bank or insure. I don't want to stress anybody, but your money is not in a vault anywhere, and your insurance policy is not a piece of paper that's in a filing cabinet anymore. It's all in the ether. It's all digitized, right? So whether it's cross-sell, upsell, so their core value chain there, and they spend lots of money. And that's where I got exposed to 24/7 and the merging of technology with business, essentially. That was a key moment. Come back to that, where there's no difference between tech and the business itself. If there's an industry where you don't see that difference, it's either high tech or banking and insurance. That was an incredible experience for about 10 years. Then I made a pivot, actually. I left the tech roles and I became head of marketing and alliances for a global consulting firm. So I went back a little bit to the dark side. Yeah. But I didn't do it in the context of tech, pure tech. I was head of marketing, and that was really, really interesting for an engineer in tech. And the story there is the founder of this business. It's an 83,000 person business. It's CGI. It's public information. He said, you know what, I want, and him and I had interacted. I was a client, and he was the executive sponsor many times. And he said, well, I want a client to help us talk to clients. And this is why I'd like you to come over and do that. That was really, really fascinating experience. And if you had told me, Chadi, where would you be at WSP today? I would have probably 2 years ago said no. But I'll tell you why I came to WSP a little bit later. Currently live in Montreal. I've lived in Europe. I've lived in the US. I've lived in Canada, briefly in Asia. Currently live in Montreal. My wife and I decided a little bit later in life to have two kids. So one of the best things I've ever done. So I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old at home, and I live about 20 minutes with them. So that's a little bit. That's a little bit about. Yeah, it is. It is the best thing I've ever done. By the way, as growing up, I've had a lot of peers and friends who had kids, of course, earlier than we did, and they would talk to you about their kids and their experiences. They'd show you all the pictures, and you sort of intellectually nod your head and say yes. And intellectually, I did appreciate it. But until you have your own kids, you have no idea what that is. Oh, absolutely. So incredible experience. Thank you for the hearts.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's a little bit about myself.
It's a wonderful story. Obviously, very vast experience, different industries, dark side, light side, dark side, light side. When you reflect on this journey, what would you suggest might be sort of key milestone moments that made you the professional you are? What maybe would you call out to be key sort of attributes that you feel that you had that were helpful to sort of propelling your career?
Yeah, I would break it down. If you don't mind, Dalibor, I'm going to break it down into some moments.
Sure.
And I'm going to then at the end of those moments share with you sort of what are the 2 or 3 things, attributes that I either figured out at the time or well after were actually good or bad for me, if you will.
Yeah.
I would say I was thinking about a little bit what has happened over the last 20 some years, and I would say to you, there's probably 5 main events, things that happened from a career point of view, and there's tons probably from a personal point of view, because the 2, by the way, go hand in hand. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the first one was when I first moved out of Canada, went to the US and went to Detroit. Based out of Detroit, worked with the manufacturing companies there. And then the second one was when I moved to Europe. It is incredible. If you get this opportunity, jump on it, and your personal situation allows you to do it. I would tell everybody, jump on it. Jump on it if you can. It helps you not take things for granted anymore. It broadens you spectacularly when you go interact with other cultures, other dynamics, other people. It broadens you spectacularly when you look back at your home country, which is Canada in my case, from the outside as well. We'll come back to that. So that's probably one really, and they're not always easy, by the way. I can tell you, I've moved 5 times physically, and there's a valley of despair period after every move. After every move, you're excited at the beginning, then you start, reminiscing or saying, what have I got myself into? And then after eventually you come back up.
Yeah.
So those moments were always important. Another moment that was really important when I was working for Engineered Products Rio Tinto. Rio Tinto had 5 major divisions. That's one of them, based in France. They decided to divest us. And I told you there, I was the CEO of that division. Is probably the most inspirational leader I've worked for. And getting divested, getting sort of the parent company saying, we don't want you anymore, and selling you to a private equity, that was a key milestone, a moment. And I'll come back to what I learned from that experience. Working for the right individual, I've mentioned her twice, probably working for that CEO was a key milestone for me that contributed to the attributes I'm going to tell you about in a second. Working in a context where your values are misaligned with the company, or where something happens and there's just not a way to reconcile who you are as an individual. And I think I said this already. I don't think you could separate the person from their work and a work from their life and all this work-life discussions. And I actually got confronted with that once in my career. And it was probably one of the toughest milestones in my career. We can double click on that if you all like. And they tell you, everybody tells you in theory, you learn more from challenges or failures or things like that than you do from successes. And they're absolutely right, actually. They're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So that's another one. And my last one I would mention to you, I hinted to it, is as an engineer, a person, who's passionate about tech and its impact on the world, not just internal tech, to leave that world and be a chief marketing officer of a $14 billion company for 2.5 years. Yeah, that was a spectacular learning experience. I talk about it on a regular basis. Anytime you get an opportunity to pivot into something adjacent. In this case, it was adjacent. It was not completely out of whack. I was still the CMO for a technology firm, technology services. But it was a very big pivot and tremendous amount of things. So if I was to throw all these things together and say attributes or things that helped me or not helped me because I needed to develop them, by far number one, and these days when I have to hire or consider somebody that I will work with, one of the first things I would look at, in addition to competency and experience and so on, is self-awareness. It sounds like I'm putting a lot of weight on that. Of course, it's only one aspect. There's many other things to think about, but why self-awareness? Not self-awareness in a egotistical way. Self-awareness of humbly, consistently, and on an ongoing basis, get to know who you are. I find it very sad to interact with individuals that spend a lot of their time figuring out everything in the world, except taking a little bit of time to invest in getting to know who they really are, what's important to them, what are their values, what works, what doesn't work, and why is it important? My premise on this, and you guys can blow it out of the water, is that how could you collaborate, work with, interact, lead others if I do not know who I really am as an individual and my blind spots and what's important to me or not? And so when you face moments of success, or you may face moments of weakness or failure or misalignment, that self-awareness, when I didn't have it, was very painful. When I had it, it made those transitions or experiences really pivotal for me. And what I have started doing about, I would say, a decade ago, 10 years ago, is every time I work with a team, after about a year of working with a team, we take the time to work on getting to know ourselves. That's a gift I give everyone, whatever it is, specializations, psychologists, testing, whatever they'd like. But then we use that also in an appropriate way to get to know the dynamic, get to know the team, because, you know, team self-awareness is as important as individual self-awareness. Are we all so strong in one area that the boat is leaning this way and it's about to capsize because we're all superstars, but we're all up front trying to steer the boat and nobody's rowing in the back or something like that? That's part of sort of collective and corporate self-awareness. I would say to you, that's one attribute. And the other attribute, both of the ones I'm going to share with you are very soft. We can talk about the technical stuff later, is this notion of the platinum rule in business. There's a book, you can Google it. There's people talk about this notion of platinum rule. So what is it briefly? So in a lot of the main religions, we follow something called the golden rule: do unto others like you'd have done to you.
Yeah,
which is very honorable when it's about hurting others or you know, anything that's inappropriate, unethical, or does damage to another individual. But in human interaction and business, it's one of the worst pieces of advice you can give somebody. And let me explain. If you're in a room and the individual, you have two individuals in front of you, and this individual's background is an analytical, scientific engineer that is more from a motivation point of view, an analytical person. And the other one is, let's get the stuff done, the red, execution focused, and so on. The worst thing you can do, and you are a yellow, a visionary, a creative person who wants to innovate the future of this world, the worst thing you can do is talk to them like you'd want them to talk to you. You need to talk to them like they want to be talked to. And that's the simplified version of the platinum rule. And if you take that and push it all the way, it's about people interactions in the business. It's about getting to know your clients and what they're looking for, internal clients, internal partners, and so on and so forth. And again, I'm putting aside, don't go out and do the hitting and smacking somebody or being disrespectful. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, and it's much harder to apply the platinum rule because it means you got to spend time figuring out with true empathy what the contexts and parameters of the other individual. That's why I go back to global experience, multicultural experience, multifaceted experiences, train that muscle. And I found that has been.
That is fantastic. That is really good. What you're describing really is a chemistry and spending time intentionally to understand the chemistry of others, having the curiosity to do that, so it's authentic, right? And having the empathy to actually put yourself in their shoes and see it from their feet. So this is really, really good. It is, and I actually 100% agree with you. We would call that concept business chemistry. You are calling it platinum rule, but it's one and the same. And it's absolutely very important. And I love.
And if I may, Dalibor,
Yeah.
sorry to cut across you. One thing you said, and I didn't mention, which is really important, is authenticity and
Yeah.
authenticity in it. It can't be just a mechanical thing that we're doing to serve another agenda, and so it's got to be authentic. And when it is really authentic, it just its power. It's incredible. Whether
Yeah.
it's engaging with clients or peers or employees or family. To be honest with you, I mean, again, having two kids teaches you a lot of lessons, and yeah, it has to be authentic.
And that authenticity, I think, probably it is from that spot that you mentioned one of your career moments where you mentioned that the values didn't align to your values. I'm going to assume you had the strength because you were authentic to challenge that and learn whatever you learned from that experience. But I love what you also mentioned. Pivot to adjacent areas. Don't be afraid to do something different for a while. And if you have opportunity to travel and experience different cultures, do it. This is like, I've had a pleasure of talking with many top tier execs, and that's consistent message. If you have a chance to do something else outside of your core thing, do it. So this is wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing. And I am curious about that value misalignment story. Maybe that's something, I don't know to what degree you can share, but I would love to hear it over a beer at some point.
No, but it is. I can share a little bit. I can share
Sure,
a little bit without naming the exact areas. Some people who know the dynamics in Canada might figure it out. But and again, I don't. What's really important in these contexts, it's to focus on your self-awareness and what's important to you, and make a decision eventually on whether something is aligned with where you are or not. Without judgment, there's no need for judgment of either the business or the other individuals in place. It's just the decision that you're making. It's a decision ultimately between yourself and yourself. So in the context I'm referring to, a situation happened. It involved a tremendous amount of stakeholders, and everybody was working really hard to navigate through the situation to make the best of it, for the client stakeholders, the employee stakeholders, and the business stakeholders. And at one point, we got to these cross sections where we had choices as to what we would communicate when to very, 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 very key stakeholders, and there were some decisions to time the communications completely differently than what personally I thought in terms of just a well-intentioned approach should be. A couple others, and ultimately it ended up with myself and a couple others just leaving the organization. The actual situation and what happened is less important than the learning for us as an individual to have self-awareness of what's important to us or not, because I do believe it eventually catches up with us. It catches up with us personally, it catches up with us health-wise, it catches up with us reputationally. I mean, I think it's really important to know who you are and what you want to do, and just adhere to it. Not that you're right and somebody else is wrong, but at least in your perspective, that's the right thing. And I've made a ton of mistakes where I was wrong, but at least I've navigated those and confronted those myself.
This is a 20-minute masterclass in executive leadership, Chadi. Thank you very much for sharing this with me and with our audience. Excellent. I think every point is right on. So Chadi, WSP is, we know, one of the largest global professional services firm. I would love if you could maybe spend some time just orienting us around, like, what is your mandate? What does it include? Perhaps what might be some of the biggest opportunities and strategies you are deploying? What may be some challenges that you are facing and how you're approaching them? I am sure there are many, many dynamics playing out right now, given where we are at in the world and the fact that you are in a global organization.
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm very pleased to talk to you a little bit about WSP. I'll do a couple of things. If it's okay, Dalibor, I'm going to take 5 minutes and tell the audience who is WSP.
Sure.
I do think we're
of course.
one of the best kept Canadian secrets in the world, and I'll tell you about, and then I'll answer your question directly. So, who is WSP? actually, the ratings of the largest professional engineering firms in the world came out about 2 months ago. Number one is a state-owned engineering firm in China that does all the engineering of their energy facilities. So think nuclear plants, charcoal plants, solar, wind, and so on. Number two is also a state-owned Chinese engineering firm that does all the transportation and infrastructure engineering for China. Third, don't worry, I'm not going to do the whole 100, Dalibor. Third is Jacobs, a very credible US firm, one of our largest competitors, based in the US. They do professional engineering. And number four, ladies and gentlemen, is WSP. So WSP today is the second largest private professional engineering firm in the world and the fourth largest by revenue across the world. A gentle fact, this is and a little bit of a healthy competition. Jacobs has already announced they will divest a certain business. So within months and quarters, we'll be the largest private professional engineering firm by revenue in the world, right? After the two state-owned professional engineering firms. And we're a pure play engineering firm. So we don't do construction. There are other companies, very, very large ones that do a lot of construction or management of infrastructure and have engineering. We are a pure play engineering firm across the world, about 75,000 people across the world. We're on every continent. And what do we do exactly? So every physically built piece of infrastructure, building, mine, nuclear plant, water management platform goes through 4 phases. Plan what do you want to do, engineer it, build it, and operate it. We do the engineering of all of those assets. So we operate, I'll give you tangible examples. World Trade 1 that replaced the Twin Towers, WSP did the engineering of that building. The Shard in downtown London, another high-rise, engineering did the WSP did the engineering of that. In Canada, CANDU reactors require upgrades on a regular basis. WSP does the engineering of the upgrade. We don't do the upgrades, but all this prep, design, engineering of the upgrade we do. We just qualified to the high-frequency rail bid that's coming out of federal government, a brand new high-frequency rail between Windsor and Quebec City. We're shortlisted. If we win, we will be doing the engineering for that multi-billion-dollar program that will basically put a new corridor for rail systems. So we do that in 4 areas: property and buildings, transport and infrastructure, and earth and environment, and mining, essentially. So think about energy transition. One last example I would give: one of the largest solar farms in the world on the sea is off the Nordics, and we are the engineering firm for that. So that's what we did. Pretty cool. So 75,000, mostly engineers and scientists, helping with the energy transition of our planet, renewing Western infrastructure that was built with a life cycle of 60 to 70 years and now it may be crumbling a little bit. Modernizing developing countries and helping them with engineering the future physically built environment. That's who WSP is, based right here in Montreal. WSP has gone from $500 million in revenues to 13 billion in gross revenues in 12 years. Wow. A lot of M&A. So if you think about that multiple, whatever that multiple is, 25 times bigger than where we were 12 years ago. It comes with a tremendous amount of opportunity, but some challenges. Obviously, I have 3 main roles in the company. All internal IT, so the CIO and his organization are in my organization. And there's quite a bit of activity there to take us from a collection of IT departments to an enterprise function. Second, I would say to global business services. So I own procurement, payables, order to cash, receivables, the middle and back office, not the client-facing stuff. So think about shared services or global shared services that companies call. And actually, we work with third parties there. And the third area that I own, which is why my title is CTO, is our external-facing digital strategy. So our industry, like many others, the industry is far behind in terms of levering digital to transform their value chain for good reasons, by the way. If you build the bridge wrong, or if you innovate wrong, things fall down, people die. So the industry has a lot of code and specification and requirements from our clients. But we are seeing digital come and change how we deliver services to our clients and what the clients are paying from digital. This is a P&L ownership, if you will. And one of my mandates is to work with the organization and basically determine for our next strategic plan how we take that business and multiply it by 7 or 8 or 10 times in terms of revenue, because we think the time is right. And for one big reason, there is more demand for our services in a lot of parts of the world. There are some exceptions. Then there is capacity between us and all the competition, number one. And number two, productivity in this industry has not evolved like other industries have. And it's ripe for opportunity to apply some of those digital learning levers into our industry so that we can fulfill that demand of what the world is needing from a natural built environment. So that's a little bit what I do. To answer your question on biggest challenges, well, on the internal side, it's a very entrepreneurial company. I've mentioned the growth. So imagine convincing, 30, 40 cultures from across the world, because that's at least how many acquisitions we've made in the last 10 to 12 years in many parts of the world. So you have the fact that there's 30, 40 acquisitions, but the fact that they are overlaid on 30, 40 different countries, cultures, beliefs, approaches, contexts, ways of thinking, and saying to them, well, here are the things that there's no point us doing it 14 ways. Maybe we can lever it one way. And here are the things you should absolutely keep doing because the local context and the dynamic is very different. So that would be the biggest internal challenge. The external challenge is making sure that we don't fall into the trap of hype around digital and waste our time doing some false track, noisy stuff rather than stuff that's centered around value for our clients. Because it's really easy in digital to fall into those. Saw that in 2 of my other industries. So hopefully the lessons learned from the other industries we won't apply. We'll make sure we apply them.
This is the mandate is gigantic, obviously. So very, very impressive. When you think about these challenges and these opportunities that are in front of you, I would love to get that tied into some of the reflections you mentioned earlier in your leadership style and approach. I would love to maybe understand, how are you thinking about talent? How are you thinking about, you mentioned balance, but you said you're not a subscriber of work-life balance. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things to unwind there, but yeah, let's talk about this notion of work versus life and so on. I don't think I think it's too much to ask for a human being to quote unquote separate work from who they are fundamentally as a human being in their life and day to day. We have to find a way where, well, at least what I try and encourage for all of us that work here is this notion of come to work, be who you are, be authentic, and let's find configurations where we can line up what you're doing to your strengths, your styles, and what your value set is. And if I may go back to this notion of go get the global experience, the multicultural experience, one thing I have learned is if you peel the onion deep enough, most human beings have much more in common than they have that's different. It's sad we don't see it in current world events, but most human beings have a lot more in common than we think they are. And so if you accept that premise, and in the context of a global business like ours, it's key to have representativity of sex, representativity of culture, representativity of values. As in our case, we have no choice. We have people working in mainland China, we have people working in Israel, we have people working in the Middle East, we have people working in the US, we have people working in Republican states in the US, we have people working in Democratic states in the US.
Yep.
We are working with countries that want to repatriate semiconductor production because of concerns about sovereignty. We are working with countries that have operations in other large democracies in the world where maybe our country is having challenges with it. Empathy, platinum rule, peeling the onion of the humanity of things, I think are as important as business and tech and knowing your stuff, essentially, as we navigate the next decade.
And interesting that you mentioned these challenges, and not everybody is reading the news. I'm assuming everybody knows the complexity of what's going on. Like, WSP is a Canadian firm. We have a very, very unique, I'm sure, opportunity here to actually show ourselves as Canadians, hopefully with a voice on the platform that can provide.
Canada is one of the best countries to really reconcile those challenges, both from a business point of view and frankly from a social, cultural, and the dynamics that we see in our world around us. I mean, I think we should take a lot more leadership position while staying authentic and humble, not gaming it, in helping whether it's business related or non-business related navigate some of those challenges that we see around us. And frankly, those challenges are becoming so important that they're making the board agenda, they're making the executive committee agenda. They're no longer something that we read about in the news and then we just keep going and then look at our next quarterly review and our EBITDA. It's not the case anymore. Even in tech, think about ring fencing, cybersecurity, segmentation. You have no choice but to understand and navigate those issues. And you have team members from all, especially in a global environment, you have team members from all the countries that you're watching in the news today. All the countries.
Yeah. It must be fascinating to actually be in that position, to be in that position, to actually manage this complexity and this.
If I may, and this belongs to the company level, the companies have to be clear back to an individual self-awareness or what's important to us or not. I'm really blessed to be working for a company like WSP because from a principles point of view, we are very clear about who we will and will not work with based on a certain set of values that are on ethics, corruption, humanity, human rights, and so on. Won't get into them today. As long as you have those anchoring elements, so you're not ambulance chasing, essentially, from a business point of view. That's really important. It's the same as you knowing what your anchoring values are. And it's not to judge others, it's just to say, these are what's important to me. Then you can go about and really, you still have to navigate and understand all the implications of social, political, cultural dynamics there. And
what you're describing, I think, is this concept of purpose taken at the individual level, at the team level, at the organizational level, and making sure that actually it works, it's connected and it's supportive and it's aligned.
Bang on.
Bang on. Excellent. Chadi, I'd like to take, we're going to have maybe 5-7 more minutes to go. I would love to get your reflections on the role of the CTO, CIO, top tech data job. You've been in the industry for, you mentioned 25 years, so 3 decades of experience. How have you observed the role of a top tech leader evolve? And even more importantly, where do you feel the role is heading, and what should be the right skills and attributes for the leader of the next decade, tech leader of the next decade?
So I worked in marketing a little bit, so I'll start off by a sensationalistic statement. I don't think IT groups and departments will exist like they've existed historically. I think they will disappear. And it's all about, in my mind, convergence. It's all about the convergence of business and technology. I think the future of technology leaders, of course, they got to specialize. Of course, they got to know what they are talking about, because there's a lot of hype out there. But the fact of the matter is the future of tech leaders have to be business leaders first and foremost. They have to be multiculturally aware. Business acumen, global acumen, social acumen will be as important as technical and financial acumen, senior executives. I think several pieces of tech the tech world or the tech department are getting commoditized, made the utility, and as such, they need to focus their energy on the business value and the value chain of those areas. This is why I come back to the beginning, full circle. You get a chance to take a role in the business. You get a chance to see different parts of the business. You get a chance to work or collaborate or partner with a business leader on a business challenge. Jump on it as fast as you can.
Now that you mentioned this and the point of view that IT department, as we know it, is not going to exist going forward, I think that your last advice, and take advantage of, go get yourself exposed to the business, takes even more importance, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you at all. As a matter of fact, my working proposition, our proposition is that the technology executive who manages to actually position themselves as business executive first, those leaders will be in best position to actually eventually be looking for the top job.
And we've seen it in a couple of industries starting to happen, honestly.
We've
seen it. Yeah.
We have. As a matter of fact, like you are a living example of a technology CIO who has, through their career, actually absorbed a growing portfolio of business mandate on top of pure technology mandate. So you would be a great example of that. So Chadi, with all the pace of change and in technology innovation coming, what it seems like daily, how do you keep yourself up to date and current?
Sure. Three things. The first two are easy. The third is the hardest. First one is read. Second one is surround yourself with people that stay up to date and are able to cut through the hype and tell you what's going to impact the business or not. And third, which is the hardest, once a year, I take a topic and I drill down. So 2 years ago, I bought myself a HoloLens 3. And on the weekends, I tried to program some stuff.
Oh, neat.
This year, I'm actually one of the users on the Copilot program with Microsoft, which allows us to use OpenAI tech in our day-to-day job and play with it. Pick one topic, fix the hours, and solve for them. It helps you stay current. It helps you cut through the hype. It helps you appreciate also how your users are going to be confronted with some of this stuff. But also at the executive level, make sure you have one or two individuals at least whose job is almost full-time to help you with those things.
Yeah, that's a very sound advice. Like, there's so much going on. You have to surround yourself with people that know, that can know, and they can filter shaft from whatever is the right saying.
Absolutely.
And Chadi, I recall is in our earlier discussion when you were talking about Platinum Rule, you actually mentioned a book. I would love to know if you might have any recommendations on good books or maybe some podcasts that you might point our audience to.
Sure. So actually, just an anecdote. About 3 years ago, I got into audiobooks. I haven't bought a physical book in a while. I'm very disappointed because I like the physical books. But audiobooks are so practical if you travel or commute and so on. I would throw 3 at you because I can't count till 4. Let me start with one classic. I always say this because this author is from my home country. His name is Khalil Gibran. He wrote a book called The Prophet. No, it's not a religious book. Yeah. Every chapter of The Prophet is a life lesson. And if you want, I could tell you read that book, and about 90% of my way of looking at life is aligned with that. And there's a book on kids, there's a book on work, there's a book on, and it's incredible. And he just happens to be born in the same country I was born in. So, and it's not a religious or a controversial book. It just happens to be called The Prophet. Fiction. So you guys heard me talk about the dark side and light side. The Thrawn series by Timothy Hahn are excellent audiobooks. If you want to get carried away, there's 3 of them. Thrawn by Timothy Zahn, Zahn. I went through those recently. And then speaking of podcasts, I think this gentleman has a podcast, and I have a colleague at work who's been harassing me to listen to his podcast. I didn't, but I bought his audiobook called Own the Day, Own Your Life by Aubrey Marcus. I understand he's got a podcast as well.
Own Your Day, Own Your Life.
Own the Day, Own Your Life by Aubrey Marcus. And not completely aligned with everything he says, but a lot of the stuff I really enjoyed listening to. So, and that's important, by the way. Read and listen to stuff, even if you don't agree with. Get a feel for everything. But there's a lot of golden nuggets in that book. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Chadi, this is fantastic. As a matter of fact, I took notes. I wasn't aware of him. I'll check him out as well. Thank you very much for that. Chadi, we are at time. I really want to thank you very much. This was a masterclass in executive leadership. So thank you so much on behalf of our audience. Really appreciate it. For those audience members following our program, next week on Wednesday, I'm going to be joined by Mike Bechtel, the chief futurist at Deloitte, and we are going to talk about the dichotomy of biometrics. We're going to talk about the positive impact of biometrics and the negative impact of biometrics, and we're going to explore these stories of what dystopian and utopian futures might look like as it relates to biometrics. That's next Wednesday. And then on Thursday, we are starting a new series called Canada's Got Tech Talent, where we will feature Canadian tech startup and scale-up companies and tell the stories of their founders, tell the stories about these emerging companies, and talk about sort of the value that they bring to the Canadian technology ecosystem. And I will be starting the series with Neo Financial, which is a fintech actually based out of Calgary, Alberta, that is a disruptor in our financial services business in Canada. I'll be joined by Andrew Chow, the CEO and co-founder, and Jeff Adamson, who is also the co-founder and chief commercial officer. So please join me next Thursday. With that, Chadi, thank you so very much again, and have yourself a lovely Wednesday afternoon.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Dalibor. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.